if you're like most people, you have probably, at some point, approached body language like it's some kind of a secret decoder ring.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the popular hacks, right? If they avoid eye contact, they're lying.
Of course.
If they cross their arms, they are definitively closed off. There's something really seductive about the idea that you can read someone's mind.
That you had the dictionary.
Exactly. The dictionary to their hidden intentions, just by watching how they move. But that simple popular approach, while it's fun, it's scientifically pretty faulty.
It is. It treats complex human behavior like a fixed language.
And if we stick to that, we're going to be wrong most of the time. So today, our mission is to move far past those oversimplified hacks. We're diving deep into the scientific, evidence-based approach to nonverbal communication. We want to show you why it's less of a secret dictionary and much more of a dynamic system of probabilities. Okay, let's unpack this.
And I think we have to start by clearly setting the boundaries of what we're even talking about. We use body language as, the common shorthand, but the scientific field calls this nonverbal communication. And it's much broader than just the body itself.
So it's not just gestures.
Not at all. It includes posture, gestures, facial expressions, of course, but also our gaze, the critical role of vocal tone, which is nonverbal, and even how we use space and time.
Space and time, okay.
The systematic study of these human signals really took off in the last century, bringing in knowledge from social psychology, anthropology, even neuroscience. And the foundational research consistently shows that a massive part of human interaction is transferred nonverbally.
Especially when things get heated, right?
Exactly. That influence spikes significantly when the situation is emotionally charged or stressful.
That immediately gets to our first big point of friction, doesn't it? The public's fascination with body language is this idea that it's the ultimate truth detector.
The lie detector.
Yeah, that it's a direct mirror of our concealed thoughts. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The science just strongly disagrees with that idea of a simple truth detector. In fact, if you approach it as a definitive dictionary that reveals lies, you're self-sabotaging your own judgment.
How so?
Decades of rigorous meta-analyses, synthesizing study after study, show that the accuracy of detecting deception based on nonverbal cues alone is surprisingly low.
How low are we talking?
When observers ignore the context and the individual, they often perform no better than if they had just flipped a coin.
Wait, so if I try to spot a liar by looking for single cues, like watching for them to fidget or look away, I'm basically wasting my time.
You are. The research is so clear on this. Relying on the idea that all liars do X simply doesn't work. The signals are ambiguous and often misunderstood. Body language is not a system for revealing thoughts directly.
So if it's not a mirror that reveals specific thoughts, how should we redefine it? What is it actually telling us?
We need to shift our thinking from mirror to marker.
A marker.
Yes. Body language primarily functions as a marker of emotional and psychophysiological states. It tells us that someone is experiencing anxiety, or that they are under cognitive pressure, or that they're excited.
Okay, what do you mean by psychophysiological states?
It's about what's happening inside their body, the stress response, the internal discomfort, not the content of their thoughts.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction. So it marks an internal shift, not a specific thought. But if that's not its main job, what is nonverbal communication primarily for from a social perspective?
Functionally, its main role is the regulation of social interaction.
Right, keeping the conversation flowing.
Exactly. Think about how essential it is. Nonverbal cues coordinate conversations, how we know when it's our turn to talk, when to yield. They transmit emotions, but most critically, they're fast, low-cost tools that signal social intent. They help us build trust or signal distance.
That makes perfect sense. It's an adaptive survival mechanism. But that still leaves the listener with the practical question. If I see a signal, how do I know if it means anxiety or just, a fly landed on their nose?
And that's where the scientific framework comes in. You have to move from that popular dictionary mindset to the 4 fundamental pillars of interpretation.
Right. And the first critical shift is abandoning that dictionary concept entirely. We have to understand that no single movement equals one fixed meaning. Instead, we have to look for the first pillar. Clusters.
Clusters are completely non-negotiable. If you try to read a single signal, you're just making an arbitrary guess. You need multiple signals happening at the same time that all point to the same overall interpretation.
And that combination of signals it increases the probability of your reading being accurate.
Exactly. Let's use an example we often see. Someone frequently touching or adjusting their collar.
Oh,
If you see only that, they could be hot, they could be stressed, or their shirt collar could genuinely just be itching. It's meaningless on its own.
but tell us how the cluster changes that whole equation.
Okay, so if that collar touching is paired simultaneously with, say, three other things, they have a tense, nervous smile, their voice tone shifts noticeably higher, and their body suddenly closes off that cluster.
Now you have something.
Now you have something. That group of four distinct behaviors dramatically, statistically, increases the probability that the person is experiencing anxiety or significant cognitive pressure. Studies consistently show emotional signals almost never happen in isolation. They appear in bunches.
That is the hard part for the casual observer, though. I mean, interactions move so fast. How do you train yourself to look for a cluster when you're already trying to process the words being spoken?
You focus on change, not detail. We'll get to that more with the baseline, but the key is to prioritize what's new. Are multiple things happening right now that weren't happening 30 seconds ago?
That leads directly to the second piece of the puzzle, which is the necessary filter for all signals. Context.
The context is everything. It's the environment. It is the crucial lens through which we have to run any cluster of signals. Without it, any interpretation is just. It's pointless.
Give us the classic example.
Take the universal hack, the woman with crossed arms. The dictionary says defensive or resistant.
Right.
But apply the context. If we see that posture in a high-stakes professional meeting where she's debating a point, yes, a defensive posture might be a possible interpretation.
A possibility.
But if we see her standing outside at a bus stop in the middle of a windy, cold winter day, the interpretation changes instantly and completely. She's simply cold.
And it's amazing how often people, even skilled observers, get that simple context switch wrong. They see the posture and they just forget to check the thermostat, so to speak.
It's true. Studies in social psychology show that observers completely change their reading of identical body language just by altering the described social setting. It proves context is king.
Okay, moving on. We're tackling the two factors that I think really separate the amateur from the skilled interpreter, especially in cross-cultural situations. Our third area of focus has to be culture and personal habits. We can't interpret behavior accurately until we've answered the question, who is this person and where are they from?
The differences here can be massive and lead to total misreadings. Think about eye contact. In the West, consistent, direct eye contact is usually seen as a sign of sincerity, attention, truthfulness.
That's what we're taught, yeah.
But if you take that exact same duration of direct eye contact and apply it in certain Asian or African cultures, it can be interpreted entirely differently, as aggression, extreme rudeness, or a serious challenge to authority.
Wow, so the same signal can mean the complete opposite.
The meaning is opposite depending on the cultural programming.
And beyond culture, we also have personal style, which I think is so easily mistaken for an emotional signal. If someone gesticulates wildly when they speak, that's just them, right?
Yeah.
Not a sign they're unstable.
Exactly. We have to separate habitual movements, their personal style, from momentary, meaningful, emotional signals. If someone has an intensely expressive face, or shrugs a lot, or always stands with their hands on their hips,
That's their default.
that's their default. Those are characteristics of their style. They are part of their baseline. They should not be mistaken for fleeting emotional signals.
Which brings us to our fourth and I think most critical piece of this whole puzzle, the true secret weapon of accurate nonverbal interpretation, baseline.
Absolutely.
The baseline is the single factor that distinguishes casual reading from serious analysis. So define it for us. What is it?
The baseline is the individual's normal, relaxed pattern of behavior. Their typical posture, their natural movements, their usual voice tone, and their standard facial expressions when they're comfortable and under absolutely no pressure.
And without establishing that,
Yeah.
any reading you make is basically flawed from the start.
Inherently flawed. For instance, if you assume all crossed arms mean defensiveness, but the person you're watching habitually sits that way because it's comfortable for them, you've just incorrectly labeled their comfort zone as a defense mechanism. You've drawn a totally wrong conclusion.
So the key principle is,
The key principle is fundamental. Only deviations from that established normal baseline have genuine significance or meaning. A sudden, visible break in their pattern is what carries the information.
so practically speaking, How do you find that baseline? Do I have to secretly film them talking about the weather for an hour? Is it possible to apply this in a single important meeting?
You don't need to be covert. You just observe them during relaxed, low-stakes moments, making small talk before the meeting officially starts or discussing a completely neutral topic, their commute, the latest sports score.
Something that doesn't require any real thought.
Exactly. Something that requires minimal cognitive or emotional input. You just look for patterns that repeat, noting their default position when they are mentally relaxed. This is especially true in deception detection studies. Research confirms that assessments become dramatically more accurate when they rely on observing changes from that individual's normal behavior.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a lot of ground here, moving away from the simplistic hack mentality to a much more rigorous framework. The essential takeaway is that nonverbal communication doesn't give you mind-reading powers. It doesn't tell you the specific secret. Instead, it reliably indicates emotional transformations.
Or shifts in their internal psychophysiological state. That is its actual job.
Okay, so to interpret these shifts correctly, you have to bring it all together.
All four components simultaneously. You have to look for clusters, multiple signals pointing one way, and interpret them through the lens of context, the environment. Then you account for cultural awareness, and absolutely fundamentally, you have to apply the baseline.
Because only deviation matters.
Only deviation matters. The goal of this deep dive isn't to give you a set of certainties, but to move you away from false certainties. Understanding this stuff based on data, it doesn't offer you simple rules, but it does equip you with much, much better questions to ask.
It lets you use critical thinking instead of guesswork.
Exactly.
And if we anchor ourselves back to that primary function, that these cues are fundamentally about regulating social interaction and signaling intent, consider this as you move forward. When have you observed a nonverbal signal actively coordinate a conversation or shift the dynamic of a relationship without a single word being spoken? Perhaps someone checked their watch or stood up suddenly and the entire feeling in the room changed. What was the context of that silent signal that made it so powerful? That's what we want you to be observing next. Thank you for diving deep with us.